This is my 19th year on the bench, and I'm proud to say that I've been a member of the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges most of those years and have been a board member for the past 5. I currently serve as co-chair of the Legislative Committee and will be serving as moderator for today's briefing. I'd like to first recognize our congressional co-hosts today, Senator Cory Booker and Senator John Cornyn, and thank everybody for attending. We appreciate our federal partners who support the work of the judiciary and other stakeholders. It is so incredibly important to have a well-educated and trained judiciary. Judges do not receive specialized training in law school to prepare us to address all the complex and complicated issues that we see on a nearly daily basis. For those of you who may not be familiar, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is one of the largest and oldest judicial membership and education organizations in the nation, serving over 30,000 professionals working in the child welfare, family, and juvenile justice systems. In fact, NCJFCJ will be celebrating 87 years of service this May. The National Council envisions a society where every child and family has access to fair, equal, effective, and timely justice. Its mission is to provide judges, courts, and related agencies with necessary skills to improve the lives of children and families who seek justice in the juvenile and family law cases. The National Council is a leader in education, research, publications, and policy development. The Council provides training and technical assistance to not only judges, but also to attorneys, probation officers, social workers, and other stakeholders within the child welfare, family, and juvenile justice systems. The work of the Council impacts over 4 million families nationwide. The core values of NCJFCJ include compassion, education, community, and leadership. You will be hearing from a panel of judicial leaders today who will comment on the complex issues children and families are facing, exactly what they are seeing in the courtroom day to day. You will learn about specialty courts and how community collaboration can improve outcomes for children and families. I'll ask each panelist for an introduction and then we'll proceed to discussions. Someone will be monitoring any questions posted and we'll be happy to answer those at the end if time permits. If time does not allow for questions, we'll be sure to follow up thereafter. So I'm going to start with you, Judge Carr, if you would introduce yourself.
Thank you, Judge Graham. I am Judge Gayl Branum Carr. I am a judge in the Fairfax Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court in Fairfax, Virginia, which, in case you don't know, is a suburb of Washington, D.C. I have been a judge in this court since 1994. My court handles everything but divorces. So we handle custody, visitation, child support, child welfare, domestic violence, protective orders, and on the criminal side, adult felonies and misdemeanors, as well as children charged with delinquent acts, both felonies and misdemeanors. I've been involved with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges almost all of my tenure as a judge, so since the mid-1990s. I joined the board of directors in 2019, and I became president of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges in July of 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Judge Capizzi, please?
Thank you, Judge. My name's Tony Capizzi. I'm a judge from Montgomery County, Ohio, not the DC area. And I have been a judge since 2004. I luckily or unluckily retired at the end of December of 2022 after 34 years involved in public service, either working as a city commissioner in Dayton, Ohio, or as a juvenile court judge. And I retired in 2022 as presiding judge in Montgomery County Juvenile Court. Our court, like Judge Carr's, does everything but divorces. Anything relating to children, be they delinquency cases on the dependency side, and also on all issues of child custody, visitation, and support. I also opened up, we're going to talk about these today because the focus of this briefing is really on specialty courts. I'm going to be talking about the variety of types of family courts and specialty courts that affect children, but also adults. My career involved with the National Council, I joined immediately upon becoming a judge because I had a senior judge who told me I should. It was one of the best pieces of advice I ever received. I was proud to be on the board and president from 2016, 2017. So I'm 7 years moved from president, and I currently serve as a past president of the council. Looking forward to being with all of you today. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you so much. And Judge Martinez Jones.
Thank you. I'm Aurora Martinez Jones. I am a district court judge for the state of Texas, and I am in Travis County, which is in Austin, Texas. I am a civil, family, and juvenile court judge. I do have to do divorces in my court. And so it is anything civil. The only thing I don't do is criminal matters, but dependency and delinquency are both in my court's jurisdiction. And by a local agreement, I am the presiding judge for all of our child welfare cases in Travis County, and I also preside over a dual status docket as well as a family drug treatment court. So I'm very happy and excited to be here. I am a board member myself, and I've served on the board for several years. And much like Judge Capizzi, I joined NCJFCJ shortly after becoming a judge, initially an associate judge in 2015. So I'm very grateful to this organization and glad to be a part of this briefing today.
Thank you, Judge Martinez Jones. I believe we'll start with you, Judge Carr. What are the issues children and families are facing in today's society? What can you tell us about what you see and hear in your courtroom?
Thank you, Judge Graham. I'm going to just briefly talk about two quick areas. One, I want to talk about specialty dockets, and then I want to spend a little more time about mental health and opioids. Specialty courts or specialty dockets are very popular in my judicial district because we have been able to show that they improve outcomes for families and children, and they increase public safety. We also learned that specialty dockets save lives, they save money, and it reduces recidivism. Currently in my court system, we have a veterans treatment docket, we have a mental health treatment docket, a drug treatment docket, and a diversion first docket. My court is launching a pilot offender accountability compliance docket to improve outcomes for survivors of domestic violence. So I just wanted to share that with our audience. The second issue is one that is very disturbing. National data shows a dramatic and alarming increase in youth fatal overdoses from 2019 to 2021, driven largely by counterfeit opioid pills. Just yesterday, in my criminal docket, I was hearing a case involving an adult charged with a sex crime against a 13-year-old girl. So it's an adult male, the girl's 13, and the evidence is that he gave this 13-year-old girl fentanyl and then asked her to perform a sex act on him. They were found in a storage unit in a local apartment. This same defendant had a prior charge in which he told law enforcement he found a 13-year-old child in a stairwell passed out on Xanax. Rather than call the police, he took the child to his apartment and laid her on his couch. The 13-year-old has no memory of what happened at his apartment. That child was reported to have run away from her home when she encountered this adult male. Law enforcement reports that there have been numerous reports of children being sexually assaulted and trafficked in the area after consuming drugs, mainly fentanyl. Another adult defendant was found with a 14-year-old child, a girl, after a drug transaction that involved the drug Molly. In the defendant's phone, they saw that this 14-year-old girl and this adult male had some sort of relationship. Law enforcement believes that this child was forced to have sex with this adult in return for drugs, and that those sex acts occurred when she was 13 years of age. This defendant also had an AR rifle in his possession. He had a prior conviction of a sex act involving a child and had a warrant out for his arrest for failing to register as a sex offender. As these cases illustrate, we are continuing to see an alarming number of children, boys and girls, using opioids in our community, in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, and some of those are children who are involved in the court system. We have had children and adults overdose, not only in our courtrooms, but in our local public schools. We've had several who have died in the school bathrooms. and in their homes and in their neighborhoods. We have seen firsthand the effects of the opioid crisis on youth in our community. Indeed, distraught parents have come to this court begging us to place their son or daughter in our detention center to keep their child from using fentanyl, even though there's no charges pending. And this is an example how the community comes to the court when they need help. And that's a factor that we have an educated and trained court system. Our probation officers are challenged with how to manage a child who has been involved in the court and is overdosing on fentanyl when our community resources and interventions are limited to address the mental health and substance use of children and families. The National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, along with my judicial colleagues, we recognize that we need evidence-based treatment that is critical to intervene on behalf of children and families so that they can find a path to recovery and thrive. And quite frankly, simply to stay alive, given the lethality of counterfeit opiate pills, which are the substance of choice for many youth in Northern Virginia. A lot of these pills, they lace marijuana with opioid and they sell them for $10. So it's very attractive and amenable to young children. We also recognize that most youth are not able to travel hundreds of miles for treatment, nor is that in line with best practices, which encourage the provision of treatment in the individual's local community. Unfortunately, this mental health and opioid epidemic is not limited to teenage children. Our cases in Fairfax County involving child welfare matters, those children who are before the court for abuse and neglect, are also skyrocketing. Last July, we had 32 babies born with drugs or alcohol in their little bodies. In fact, I was hearing a case recently, and the family was being supervised by Child Protective Services due to the parents' domestic violence issues. Their young toddler found a piece of candy in their home and ate it. The candy was fentanyl. The baby overdosed, but fortunately survived. The child's older brother had been selling fentanyl out of the family home unknown to the parents. That child has been charged with distribution of a controlled substance, which is a felony. Judges in the community need help from the federal level to address this national epidemic. We don't have enough services. We don't have enough programs for mothers, fathers, children, and babies. We don't have enough services and interventions for our children. We must address the capacity issues and the underlying causes of why children and families are significantly struggling with mental health issues, including anxiety, depression, trauma, and other behavioral health issues, particularly since the onset of COVID. We're working hard to expand youth substance use and treatment capacities so that we can have treatment centers, detox centers to help our children get away from drugs and opioids. Filling this void will provide a vital need and provide critical services to youth and families. It will also create a model for the provision of youth withdrawal management and residential services that could be used as a model for the nation. At the national level, the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges is recognizing these issues and needs. We created a new behavioral health unit within our organization to help in addressing the mental health crisis in this country to provide crucial training, education, and resources to judges and court personnel to effectively intervene in these areas. Undoubtedly, other communities across the state and the nation would need best practice models to expand their local continuum of youth substance use treatment for both children and families. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Carr. Judge Capizzi, Judge Carr mentioned specialty courts or specialty dockets. What can you tell us about specialty courts and how they can be utilized to address these kinds of issues?
Sure. Thank you, Judge Graham. Now, there are a variety of types of specialty courts, and the phrase specialty courts, specialty dockets really is interchangeable. I can say there are adult veteran courts. There are actually mortgage foreclosure courts, but what we're focusing on here are the ones that really affect families. And of course, veterans courts affect families, but life courts, a juvenile treatment court, and a family treatment court are what you heard Judge Carr talk about, which I'm going to elaborate a little more on. Specialty dockets or specialty courts really focus on a special challenge of the individual, be they a child, or a family have. When I got on the bench in 2004, we had a very, very small juvenile drug court. And over the years, I really grew it to be the largest juvenile drug court in Ohio. And we changed the name because name should be a positive, not negative. And so our juvenile drug court nowadays is called the Juvenile Treatment Court. That, of course, is a court where young people 18 and under may commit crimes as a result of drug abuse, drug use of any type, anything from as terribly simple as marijuana up to what Judge Carr talked about, fentanyl, barbiturates, all those kinds of drugs. And there's really unique way as a judge to focus on those kinds of cases, because most of those children that come to your court who have a drug problem, they basically, and I hate to say this in a bad way, or don't want to be in a bad way, but they commit crimes because of their drug usage. They assault, they mostly steal, and they cause civil crime or acts if they were to be adults to really feed their habits. And so there's a very unique way of working with young people who are on a drug court docket and how to manage both them and their families. And frankly, when you become a judge, and I practiced in juvenile court for 25 years before I became a judge, no one teaches you how to be a juvenile court judge, except really the National Council. And when I got on the bench, I took over this little drug court, and I saw the problem was huge. And we went from 10 youth to 150 youth at the peak of my drug court program. And I tell you, it was taking me 4 days a week to do my drug court. Because in a drug court scenario, especially that scenario, you see children, or if it's adults, on a regular basis. In other words, in a normal case, you may see them at an initial appearance. You'll see them when they become for a plea, and then you see them for sentencing. But in the drug court or a mental health court, especially docket, you see the children or the adults every week for maybe 3 months, and then every 2 weeks for 3 months, then every 3 weeks. And so you begin to wean the individual off the need to see the judge. The judge adds to the case a lot of time, but the interaction one-on-one with the individual before the court makes a big difference. And so training to judges and magistrates to do those kinds of cases are critical. Well, after about 8 or 10 years of doing my juvenile treatment court, I realized that there are a lot of young people coming to that court not because their primary diagnosis was drug addiction. Their primary diagnosis was mental health. And back then, we put everybody together. We put them all in drug courts all over the country. And we were the first court in Ohio to say young men and women with mental health issues don't deserve and shouldn't be placed in a drug court. You'd be placed in what the mental health court, where we were able to deal with the mental health challenges that child and family had. And the secondary challenges were normally drugs, because they weren't getting their proper medication. And so they took drugs to try and self-medicate. And so I want to describe a very distinct situation here. Young people in drug courts are there because they abuse drugs. And the goal of the court is to get that individual to stop using drugs, to get them out of trouble. And there are a lot of ways to do that, but I think research has shown that the best way to do it is to not make a child be abstinent day one, but to work with that child, explain to them the positive and negative effects of drug usage, and get them to the point where they individually decide they want to stop using, almost like what we do with alcoholics. And then there are young people in the mental health docket. And I will tell you this, this is through 25 years of experience. Young people who have mental health challenges, if you look at the crimes they commit, they assault teachers, they assault their peers, they rarely steal, they rarely cause serious crimes, but the crimes they cause are because of their mental health challenges. They have anger or aggression issues. And so for those young people, and again, think about it, in a drug court, you want to get kids off drugs. But in a mental health docket, the skill is understanding these young people are different. These adults are different. And instead of getting them off drugs, you need to get them to take the drugs that they should be prescribed so that they can be medicated to sustain their lives and go forward. And so a drug court, try to convince anyone who's a participant to get off the use of drugs. And in a mental health docket, the focus is on, let's find out what drugs best work for you as a child or you as an adult, and let's put you on a plan so that you can be medicated to sustain yourself so you don't have the anger issues, you don't have the depression issues. So those are two very different kinds of courts, and how you approach them as a judge is very different. The third was a result of a tragedy, and this is sort of what Judge Carr was saying. In 2018, Montgomery County, actually 2017, 2018, Montgomery County had a very bad situation. We were the #1 county in the United States of deaths per capita because of opiates. And so my county, which was about 650,000 people per capita, was #1 drug death capital in the United States. And frankly, my particular courtroom, my offices, I would look out the windows of my office, and the back of my office touched the back of the coroner's office. And so back in 2016, 2017, I would see white vans coming up every day, 5, 10, 20 people who were dying because of opioids. And as a result of that, we started a family treatment court, another specialty docket. This docket was for families, parents, who because of their drug addiction challenges were not able to care for their children. And so we really opened up that court out of a necessity and need and an emergency in Montgomery County. And sadly, we've maintained it because drugs haven't gone away. The challenges of 2016 and 2017 may have changed a little, but people at every level, at every age, are still dying because of these drugs. And I want to sort of tell you a story. In my drug court docket, the goal, of course, is to get young people to get off the drugs. And we were very successful. We had a 88% success rate getting young people to be off drugs 3 years after they graduated from my program. Well, when a person graduates, we don't, as a society, give them services to maintain. And in a particular case, I had a young man who went away to college after successfully graduating from a treatment court, my drug court. And he came back from college. He was a senior in college. This was 4 years later. He came back, and on one night, 4 young people who had been in my program at 16 and 17 and 18 who had graduated, they attended a party, and 4 ODs that night, and they all died of taking fentanyl. A tragic situation. And so I made it a point, thank God I had very few young people die during my 20 years on the bench, but I went to every funeral. And I went to this young man's funeral, and I'm standing next to the casket with the young man's father. And now we're standing there. The young man's 21, passed away in his casket. His father says to me, "Judge Capizzi, we want to thank you. As a family, we want to thank you for everything you did for our son." And I said, "How can you thank me? We're standing next to your son who passed away because he OD'd." He says, "Judge Capizzi, your court, your treatment court, gave us 4 more years of his life. If your court wasn't there when he was 16 and 17, he would not have gone to college. He wouldn't have those experiences. We would have lost him. So thank you for what you did." And so that really hit home, that what we do is life-changing, and thank God in most cases successful, but not always. And so then the next story and the tragedy is that, as Judge Carr mentioned, our family treatment court, the goal is to help adults be able to care for children. Because in the long term, public service, public government can't take care of children forever. And so, we are trying to help adults who have drug addiction issues, and helping those children have a safe environment to grow up in. And tragically, we've had, as Judge Carr mentioned, we've had a few young people, and young at this point, these are adults with young children, young people being 30 and 40 years old, who because of fentanyl or heroin or other drugs, we've had 2 of those individuals pass away. Luckily, never in my courtroom, but 2 adults passed away, OD'd in the hallway. And here's the tragedy of that situation around the country. Because of those challenges, those types of drugs, I've gone out to the community every month and given updates as to how we're doing in all these different courts. And I had a few police officers come up to me and say, Judge Capizzi, we understand what your goals are, but we're getting tired. We're getting frustrated because we go out to homes and we're saving people's lives by giving them Narcan. But how many times can we do that, Judge? Why should we be going to the same house 4 days in a row or 4 days out of 10, saving a life? When you and I know, I don't know this, but they said to me, Judge, you and I know these people are going to die. So should we even be wasting our time on these people anymore? And I have to do a drug court 101 and a treatment court 101 for the police officers and say, you know, guys and ladies, the tragedy is we can save these people. Family treatment courts work. They're extremely challenging, but we can work with families to make a difference. And versus other courts, family treatment courts take a long time. And so when a regular drug treatment court for most children, the length of stay is about 6 months. But when we're dealing with adults who have a severe addiction problem, and we're dealing with children, those cases normally take 18 months. And so some courts around the states have challenges because everybody wants the kids to go home. And if they don't go home within a year, we should give up on the parents. But studies are showing that family treatment courts can work very successfully. But we need to understand they take 18 months to 2 years for the appropriate treatment, be it either in-house, outpatient. And what the council is able to teach us as judges is how to treat each of these individuals, be they children or adults, uniquely because of their unique challenges. And frankly, you know, I go to NCJFCJ conferences every year. I've been going for 20 years, and I'm really probably one of the experts in the country on juvenile treatment courts and juvenile mental health court. But every year I go, and every year I find out new laws, I find out new techniques, new approaches, new evidence-based techniques to work with children and families. And so these specialty courts are different. They make a judge become a lot more personal with the family. The days when a judge, like in the Perry Mason kind of days, when the judge would be on the bench and be king or queen and look down on people is not what drug courts are about, not what treatment courts are about. When I'm doing my mental health docket with my young people, I'm sitting at a desk with them at the desk with me. I'm not up at my bench because you need to be close to these children. And so I will sit at a table here. Just think of an attorney's bench in a courtroom. And I sit at that bench on one side, and the young person and their parents sit there, the custodians. We interact in a very close personal relationship. And that's what's unique about specialty courts. We become more than a judge. We're sort of a judge / therapist. We're a judge / therapist / social worker. Because frankly, in all these specialty dockets, there's a unique way to work with the children and families. I want to sort of emphasize the family part of it. Because even when you have an adult drug court and you're working with an individual, if you just touch that individual, you're not going to change that person. You need to interact with the family to make them understand. And so NCJFCJ, in its expertise, has taught me and many, many other judges and legal professionals in the country on how to interact with these families and how to make a difference in their lives. And so we change lives every day. We know we do. We save lives every day too. And we do that because of the education that we're receiving from the council. And when we're doing that, in the long run, we are saving people going back to court. So we're saving recidivism challenges. We are saving young people and adults being incarcerated. We're giving them a new chance on life. And we're definitely helping families who previously may lose their children because of a drug addiction and never get them back. But we're helping those family units stay together. And at the same time, we're helping government get out of a family's life and let them run their own families the way they want to. So those are uniquenesses, Judge Graham, of really specialty dockets and how they seem complicated. They are, because our focus isn't on the past. It's really not about the present. It's about how do we change that child or family for the future. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Judge.
Thank you so much for those compelling stories. Judge Martinez Jones, Judge Capizzi mentioned law enforcement's frustration with some of this. And so how important is community collaboration in these specialty courts? What sort of outcomes are we seeing for children and families? What's the hope for the future?
Thank you. Yes, so as you heard from Judge Capizzi and Judge Carr, there's a lot of nuance and complexities to being a judge in a specialty court. There's a lot of nuance and complexity to working with children and parents who have a substance use disorder or co-occurring with a mental health disorder. And really, it takes a lot of resources, education to figure out how to be that judicial leader, like Judge Capizzi said, on the spot, doing Specialty Courts 101, helping law enforcement to understand. One of the wonderful things about our programs, our specialty courts, and the way that we learn to be judges in those courts through a substantial and robust education is that we take a multidisciplinary approach to collaboration, and it has to include the community. And it is not something that judges get taught immediately. And so we have to learn special skills to work with families. We have to learn special skills to work with juveniles. And then when we're layering on a specialty court on top of that, that requires extra education in order for us to be able to do that good job, to be able to give that education to one of our multidisciplinary partners there when it's needed to make that impact and send that message. So I want to make sure that that's clearly understood that the education that we get as family and juvenile court judges is substantial. We have to have that foundation really strong to be able to add the additional skills that are needed for judges in order to be able to do things like specialty courts and work with special populations who do have more complex needs if our justice systems are going to best serve them. I think a lot about my family treatment court in my community. We got started in 2008, and it really started from community conversations. We noticed, just like Judge Capizzi noticed in his jurisdiction, the need. We had parents with substance use disorders who had children that were being either neglected or at risk for abuse. We needed to be able to figure out a way to support those children and families. And so as a community, we had the conversations and looked at a specialty court for those parents. When we got that started, I feel very grateful. I was an attorney for parents and for children at that time on those specialty courts. So I really mostly worked with parents who were a part of the program. They were participants. And I would talk to them about what it would be like to be in such a collaborative type of program. And for a while, it was something that we had to sell people on, including our prosecutors. This is a good way to move forward. And through that, it required a lot of education. Our judge at the time who led us, one of our former NCJFCJ presidents, Darlene Byrne, is the one who really spearheaded that effort. And through her efforts, she was bringing education, she was bringing information, things that she had from NCJFCJ to the rest of us, being a model court, ready to do initiatives and try best approaches and best practices, and convinced the community that this was going to be good, not only for the families that were going to get to directly participate in these programs, but for everybody in our community. And when that was explained to me as an attorney and really learning how that worked, what I realized is how true that was. By bringing all of this education, support, resources, community collaboration, and multidisciplinary practices, what we're able to do is bring the bar up in our standard in our legal system and really provide more education, information, and supports for the entire community. So we had myself and a bunch of other lawyers who understood substance use disorders better. We understood mental health disorders and how those co-occurring disorders, when they're happening at the same time, impact families. We understood what resources were needed in order to be able to get children and families the help that they needed. We understood how to navigate that in a legal system in a way that we had never thought about before. We were really thinking outside the box. We knew and learned about all the different partners and professionals in the community who could help and who wanted to be a part of solving the problem. And this didn't just stay in our specialty court. Our general family law dockets, our general juvenile court dockets all started hearing about this program and said, wow, let's learn more about that. We may not be operating a specialty court, but there are some things going on there that we can implement without it having to be a specialty court. We can take best practices. We can have more frequent hearings with people who are involved in these situations. We can lean on and refer to experts for making those treatment decisions and not guessing and assuming what treatment people should have. We could make sure that we do collaborate with a multidisciplinary team to make sure that everybody is well informed on best practices from all the different aspects that impact children and families. Really looking at making sure we personalize those services, no matter what kind of court or program they're in. Being trauma informed was also very big for specialty courts and is something that can be utilized on any kind of docket. And one of the biggest sells that our former judge, and she's now our Chief Justice of one of our appellate courts, gave to the community was that this is just a start. Invest in this specialty court program, and this program will give back to everyone. And I feel very grateful to now be in the role of presiding judge over this program because I'm able to make good on that commitment. We're currently in this community in Austin, Texas, looking at how the best practices and lessons learned from our specialty court are going to roll out across all of our child welfare dockets. How we're going to use these practices and these lessons learned to help support all children and families who are impacted by our court system, what we can do to support them regardless of whether or not they're in a specialty program. And it's because we took a chance and did the specialty court that we were able to bring so much to it. And it has been a truly amazing experience to see what we can accomplish. Our specialty courts do require a substantial investment, but I think the outcome that we have for raising the bar across the board for all of our family and juvenile courts is something that we cannot measure. And so I am really excited because I've seen the impact already playing out. I've seen in my juvenile court a youth who said, I know I have a problem with substances, and I've seen my mom go through a program, and I want to do what she's doing so I can do better myself. I want to know more about meetings. I think that having support and other people who've been through what I've been through and are struggling with what I'm struggling with may be helpful for me to help me stay accountable so I don't go back to using. Neither of these, the mother nor the child, went through a specialty court program. But because in our community, we're knowing what to do regardless of what program they're in, the impact is spreading far and wide. So one of the other things I was thinking about what Judge Carr said, and one of those ways in which we measure success with being able to have the insight and the judicial leadership, the resources and the education to put forth these programs, are that the outcomes sometimes are not exactly what you expect, but when you think about it, you can see how amazing it is. When we're talking about babies who are born with substances in their system, from the work that we've done in our specialty court through 2008 till now present, we've had one child only who had that was born during our program that had substances in their system. We've had dozens and dozens and dozens of other babies born, all with no substances in their system. So regardless if their parent completed the program or was successful, what we have done is given so many lives a chance to start off clean, healthy, sober, and with an ability to move forward without the kinds of concerns we have for those babies who are born with substances in their system. And if we think about the lives impacted in that way, it is immeasurable about what good these programs can do and how the lasting positive impacts continue to ripple and move outwards. So I think that it's very important as we think about it and we focus that we know it is going to be not just one little specialty that we're looking at and carving out, but it impacts all of our family and juvenile court dockets to be able to really think about the impact of specialty courts.
Well, thank you so much, Judge Martinez Jones. I really appreciate your comment about investing now because the children now are the adults in the future. I want to give all of our panelists an opportunity to make some final comments. I'll start with you, Judge Carr, and one question for you. All three of our panelists have mentioned evidence-based best practices. What is that and why is it so important?
Thank you. Evidence-based practices is science. Science that it has been gone through the ritual of research, data, tested over and over again to say, if you use this method, you'll get this result. And I love the question because, as I said, I've been a judge for 29 years, and we never talked about science in juvenile and family courts. That was somewhere else. And now we use science to guide decision-making. We use science to help us improve outcomes. And so it's a part and parcel of everything we do in the juvenile and family court systems, so that we cannot just go on our gut. It's no longer that gut feeling. It's based on science and data and research that says if we use this type of instrument, if we use this sort of assessment to do a risk assessment, for example, then we have a better likelihood of understanding what services and interventions are needed to help this family. So the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges is heavily reliant on evidence-based practices, best practices to guide judges and helping them make the best decision, the most informed decision.
Thank you. Any other final comments?
My only final comment is the fact that mental health issues are impacting across all of our dockets. It doesn't matter what type of docket it is, whether it's children, whether it's adult, whether it's a custody case, whether it's a child welfare case. It is just everywhere. I mentioned earlier, in particular regards to children, our children are buying fentanyl for $10. They think they're buying something else. They may think it's marijuana. And it's really impacting their ability to be productive citizens. The biggest dilemma I've had is when I have a child who has overdosed and survived, which is good, from fentanyl, then what do I do with that child? How do I get that child connected to an appropriate service or intervention? I want to make sure we understand every child who uses fentanyl, for example, is not addicted. Some of it is just use. Some of it can be a full-blown addiction. But we have to know what we're dealing with in order to intervene properly and then get to the root cause of it, which is usually the mental health issues. So I said earlier, and I'll say again, we need our federal partners to help us define what services and interventions are needed, and we need them in each of our communities so that we can intervene appropriately. And judges need to have the education, the skills to know what is needed to intervene in an appropriate way to keep our communities safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Carr. Judge Capizzi, I'll go to you next for last comments. And one particular question: how can our federal partners, in fact, support our judges and other stakeholders to become educated and trained to handle these complex cases?
Well, I got a great answer for that, Judge.
Okay.
But let me back up for a second and sort of end it with that answer, because I want to draw people into this conversation a little too. You know, Judge Carr mentioned evidence-based, and we all did. And what's critical is data collection. And the National Council, in addition to what we do in terms of educating, we have NCJJ, which is our research really division of the council. And that particular wing of the council is critical because it collects the data, which we therefore use to decide what is working, what's evidence-based and what is not. And, you know, I want to give an example of that. When I had my drug court and I thought we were doing an amazing job, we had some data collection done, and what we frankly found out, as good as what we were doing, we found out that our data didn't show that our youth of color were graduating at the same rate. They were graduating, but not graduating as well as Caucasian children. And so we using that data, we therefore reached out to the country and said, okay, what are we doing great, but what can we do better to make sure we give youth of color the same chance to succeed? And through training, through the National Council, some other organizations, we revamped some of our program to not make it easier in any way, but to be able to understand better youth of color and what their particular needs and challenges were. And with that, I'm proud to say when I left the bench in 2022, youth of color were actually graduating at a higher rate than kids of Caucasian color. And so data is so critical. And once you get the data, with the help of the National Council, that data can then help you modify your program to make it even better than it already was. And so I went on another example. As a judge, it was very challenging working with children specifically because of the high level of drugs they're using to say medically assisted treatment, MAT is the acronym. And judges have a hard time understanding that, you mean I should give a 15-year-old the right to use more drugs to get off of drugs? I need to give them some other type of drug. And evidence-based practice and data showed that even with children, use of medically assisted treatment was a very successful way to treat children to hopefully get off that cycle of going from marijuana to meth to cocaine to fentanyl, or just from weed to fentanyl, depending on what would happen. And so that's another way where research and data collection helped us understand. And through medically assisted treatment, we were able to help so many more children do what they need to do to get off the drugs seriously. And so what can we ask our federal partners to do, frankly? As you've heard, I think we're all good judges. I think we tried hard in our careers the best we can to help children and families. But what we learned, we really didn't learn in law school. No one teaches you how to be a juvenile court or a family court judge. They really don't. Law schools don't push that aspect of how we help our community. So we rely upon specialized training. And specialized training education is provided by NCJ and some other organizations. And we all compete for federally competitive dollars to support training for juvenile and family court judges and the personnel, because it's not just us. It's our staff, our probation officers, our mental health professionals that work with us. We train everybody because everybody helps us get the work done for these kids. And so we are urging the members of Congress, Representative Takano in the House is circulating a dear colleague letter, and Senator Booker in the Senate. And we need your different individual legislative offices to sign dear colleague letters to support Senator Booker and Congressman Takano to get us to the point where we can really make sure that we don't lose track, because we, as you know, sadly, the 2025 appropriation process is still ongoing. And although we received level funding in 2024, we really need to make sure through your support, we can maintain 2025 levels. We've not asked for an increase. We just need maintenance of the current levels of support from Congress to make sure we can continue to teach judges and other court personnel and mental health and medical providers the best way to work with children and families. So, Judge, I hope I answered your question, Judge Craig.
Yes, thank you so much, Judge Capizzi. And then Judge Martinez Jones will let you wrap everything up for us today. And maybe you could comment on, boy, what's going to happen if we don't have a well-educated and well-trained judiciary to handle these cases.
Sure. And so as we think about what Judge Capizzi said, and really making sure that we have what judges need in order to be educated to do this great work, I hope that people understand there are a lot of us judges who want to get it right. We want to do the right thing, and we want to be bold enough to make sure that we're doing the right thing. It is a hard time for judges. It really is. But I think some unity and supporting judges who want to do right by the community and making sure that we have the tools necessary to do that would go a long way to help the judiciary be extraordinary and exceptional. That's what we strive for. And I really feel strongly that being a part of the NCJFCJ helps me do that. But it takes constant learning and open-mindedness to be able and willing to attend all of the conferences and receive the education. But we have to have that available for those of us who are really out here doing the hard work and making sure that we're doing it well to the support and benefit of the people in our community. So that is my last word as far as making sure that the message of support for those of us out here doing the hard work and being judicial leaders is there and available, so we can keep doing that and helping the communities.
Thank you, Judge Martinez Jones. And obviously, we've got great leaders on our panel today. Judge Capizzi has something else to add. Your hand's up.
I did. Judge Martinez Jones mentioned something which I think we need to repeat. And that is, right now in our country, there's a real challenge and a battle against the judicial system. And that battle has damaged the image of judges and the legal system at every level of government. And, right now we focus so much on federal law, federal courts, and we're focusing on state criminal courts and state civil courts. But frankly, to those people watching this, we are the people that are closest to the families we're talking about. A federal court judge rarely makes a decision that affects a child and a family. Now, there are exceptions, of course, and I don't want to go into all those, but on a daily basis, the judges of the National Council, we are touching these children and families every day. It's almost like, when they say the most important government is local government. Well, the most important judiciary is the local judiciary. And so as we focus on the needs of this country, we need to focus on the needs of the localities, and that means local judges. And so I just want to make sure we press that point, that we don't want to get lopped up in that cycle of negative comments about federal judges here or state courts here, when what we do is successful and what we do changes the lives of children and families. We make a difference in this country because of how we interact, the knowledge we've learned, because of great instruction from NCJFC. And that is touching families, that's touching children, and that change is dramatic. And so without their help at the congressional level, that our ability to continue to represent and work with these children and families goes away. So just want to make sure we didn't lose track of who we are locally.
Thank you so much. I believe we have our website is posted in the comments. And I also wanted to make sure that I thanked all of our esteemed panel for today, and remember to thank again our co-hosts, Senator Booker and Senator Cornyn. I hope we've provided some insight into NCJFCJ, the great work that it does, and how important these issues are for children and families. Thank you so much. I'm not entirely sure who ends the meeting.